Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. I am your host, Christy Haberman. I am glad you're here. Thanks for being a part of our community. A few disclaimers before we get started. I am a licensed therapist. However, this podcast is not to be considered mental health therapy or counseling. It is for entertainment purposes only and is not associated with my counseling practice, Christy Haberman Counseling Services. Thanks for showing up. Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. This is your host, Christy Haberman. I'm sitting here with the wonder dog, Kai. If you can hear her snoring in the background. I'm back from West Virginia. I will have to say, since Christopher died, I have a lot more of a sense of gratefulness. Gratefulness for my experiences, gratefulness for life. But I've always wanted to travel for him. So he had gone to school to be a nurse, and he wanted to be a travel nurse. And then he also wanted to be, and I can't remember what they call them, but the people that respond to car accidents in a helicopter. He wanted to be that kind of nurse. And he never got to do that. His first job was working in the NICU with children. And they said he was very good about it, but I know it really frustrated him to see some of the situations that those children were in, lack of prenatal care, neglect. I mean, I know that was hard for him. But he never got to do more than that. He had just moved to the ER when he died. I don't think he even started the new job. It's just so very, very sad. Luckily, though, he had life insurance that went to his daughter. For privacy purposes, I don't talk about her very much because it's just not fair to her. And there's a whole side of that story that I'm just going to keep to myself. So I traveled to West Virginia and I gave my presentation. And it was kind of embarrassing because my voice did get quavery. I got a little teary-eyed. But talking about death does that to you. And while I was there, after the presentation that day, I went to the Potomac River. And I never thought that I would see that part of the country. And I was standing on the Potomac River and I just had this sense of gratefulness. I was just grateful. I was grateful that I was able to do the trip. I was grateful that I was asked to be a speaker. I was grateful for so many things. And the weird thing is, too, also, that I kept smelling the smell of sage, burnt sage. And in sage, we have a lot of Native American people that burn sage to purify a space or to send their messages up to the spirit world. And I thought, how interesting is it that I'm in this town? I'm not going to say what town I was in, but on the Potomac River, and I'm smelling the sage, and I kept looking for it, and I couldn't see it anywhere. And then having this sense of gratefulness that I was able to participate in this experience. On the other hand, part of the experience was very, very frustrating. And part of the reason why I do this podcast. So I met another therapist. She didn't realize that I was a therapist until after we got into this work event that I was at. And she was a speaker. I was actually presenting on, I do crisis response. I have for years, responding to death of employees. I've done it in the local area, and it was a training for crisis response. And during the course of our conversation, I had told her that I had this podcast. And she goes, "Oh, that's really cool. I know a lot of therapists that do podcasts." And she gave me somebody's name. I wrote it down. I was like, "Oh, I can check into them, see if she'd be interested in hearing my story and why I started a podcast." And then as I was leaving, she says, "Oh, well, connect with this person. Uh, it was grief.com, because he's an expert in grief." And I'm looking at this lady. Now, I could have told her more, but I didn't. And I thought to myself, I don't need anybody from grief.com to tell me about grief. I don't need to go on this person's podcast and tell them my story about how I got started in being interested in grief and how to attract more clients to me. That was never the purpose of this podcast. Never. In fact, I'm not doing counseling anymore. I need a break. I'm actually not seeing or accepting any new clients. But to be fair, I didn't tell her that. But the anger and the frustration that came out in me was rather interesting. Because I just looked at her and I was like, I don't need another book to tell me how to grieve. I don't need that. What I need to do is talk to other grieving moms because we are the experts. And I say that over and over and over again on this podcast. And I get a little frustrated with that when I see, and part of me starting to wonder if people like that, because I did go check out his website, and he says, sign up for this free class or sign up for that free class. And I'm beginning to wonder if they're taking advantage of people that are feeling so vulnerable because they're giving out this impression that somehow there's getting better from grief. That has just not been my experience or the experience that I've talked to of people around me. That therapists are selling this idea that there's a way to feel better. And then they have that grief recovery method. I don't know if you've seen that out there. And it's very, very frustrating because I don't know if you can get better. I know you come to acceptance, but I'm still freaking sad. I'm still sad. And I still miss Chris. And I was at this place where they had, I don't even remember the name of it, but there was a lot of steps. Posted it on my Instagram. You can go see it. It was a memorial to the first steamboat. And there was a sign that said no skateboarding. And I'm looking at that thing going, Christopher'd walk over to his car. He'd grab his skateboard. Even at 32 years old, he would have grabbed his skateboard and he would have skateboarded down that whole long sidewalk. And it made me sad. Was I sad enough to start crying at that moment? Probably not, but I've gotten a lot better at self-control. A lot better at self-control. So it's just kind of frustrating when I run into professionals like myself. And I just think to myself, you don't have a clue. You just don't have a clue. And I'm thought to myself, am I obligated to tell them and educate them? I don't know. And how much credibility would they give me? Because do they need to believe that we can recover. Like, what do they do? What do they do when we go to therapy and we talk about the same things over and over again because we miss our children? Do they get frustrated, I wonder? Because it's their belief system that it gets better. And then it comes back to the financial piece of it too, is like, how much money are you going to invest in trying to feel better? You know, you're chasing after, this is going to be the thing that'll make me feel better, and this will be the thing that make me feel better. So I can tell you my journey. My journey was, I became very interested in mediumship. Put a lot of money into mediumship. Put a lot of money into books on learning how to develop my intuition. I put a lot of money into getting psychic readings, just an attempt to make sense of where Christopher was. And then I moved into getting Reiki. I was like, if I clean up my energy, I can energetically connect with Christopher. And then I did. And then I realized I wasn't getting any better with the Reiki. So then I went back to therapy and got EMDR. EMDR has gotten me the closest to where I used to be, but I'm still sad. My trauma has lessened, but I'm still sad. And now I have moved into acceptance. Acceptance of the fact that I will always be sad. So, in conjunction with talking to this other therapist and realizing that if you haven't been through it, you don't know what it's like. And should you really be messing in things, you don't know really what it's like. Haven't decided on that yet. But I'm really starting to advocate that's where we need to be. So the second thing that happened during this week is I'm at this training and people are being trained to respond to a crisis. And they talk about it like it's so easy. It is easy. Shouldn't say it is easy for me. But it is, I guess, kind of. Because when Christopher died, I felt that pain. I lived that pain. And I'm still here in that pain. So it doesn't scare me. It does not scare me one iota to be there when somebody gets told that somebody died. I can be there. I can hold your hand. I can listen to you scream. And I can be there in that moment with you. And I don't feel the need to make the other person feel better because it's never going to feel better again. And I'm trying to talk to these people and be like, but do you understand? Like, I asked them, how comfortable are you with death? Are you comfortable? Can you be with someone that just found out their loved one died and manage your own emotions and be present for them? And they did not have the ability to have the conversation. And that tells me that they didn't have the ability to be in that moment with those people. And I just became more and more frustrated. And I even said to them, I had responded to a crisis. I kind of got shoved into this position of talking to this person because no one else wanted to do it. And I was willing to do it. And I said, these are all these professionals that are supposed to be trained in a different way than I am. And they could not talk to this person. but I could. But I only could because my son died. And because I understand death. I understand the pain, the frustration, the feelings of it. Because I live here. It was very, very frustrating. And I was like, no wonder people that go to therapy sometimes get very, very frustrated with their therapist or their doctors or... So my first doctor that I went to after Christopher died, and I don't remember if I have talked about this on the podcast or not. So I think it was a couple of weeks afterwards, but I'd been having some pretty bad chest pains. And I went to the doctor, and the lady's checking me in, listening to my heart, your blood pressure, all that good stuff. And I told her, I said, my chest hurts. I said, but my son died, so maybe I just have a broken heart. Do you know that woman left the room and went and got the doctor? And the doctor never asked me about my chest pain. Not one word. And now, come on, he's a military doctor. Now, if our military doctors who are going to go out into combat and potentially deal with soldiers with life-threatening wounds that may die, how can you not talk to me about my broken heart? It's so frustrating to me. And it was later that I found out that there's actually a syndrome called broken heart syndrome. I could have been having a heart attack. And no one would talk to me about it because my son died. And so when I'm in this room and I'm listening to these people, and they're talking about what paperwork needs to be done, what understanding you need to have, talking about understanding how they're going to feel, but they never talked about how they were supposed to be present for the other people. Like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to show up? And when I brought it up, they just wouldn't even talk to me. And I think about that because it's not unlike what happens in a crowd. Do you remember going to your first party, dinner party, group gathering after your children died? And how at the party, and this happens often when you're new in grief, because you want people to know and you want people to understand. So you say, yeah, so my child died last month or 2 months ago. And how everybody in the room just looks at you. And then the conversation continues like you haven't even spoken. That's how it went down. And then they don't really talk to you because, oh my God, you really want us to talk about this? You don't want us to stay on the superficial level about what the paperwork's going to be like? No, I want you to be real. And this is the same group of people I did my presentation for. And they said, oh yeah, you definitely made it real. People, it is real. Death is very real. For those that have experienced it firsthand and up close and in your face, it's very real for us. And we remember. We remember who shows up for us and who doesn't show up for us. So I walked away from that training being very frustrated. And I asked myself, so if Christopher hadn't died, what would my experience of the training be? I probably would have been just like them and said, yeah, I can handle it. I'm a strong female. I have my own emotional baggage under control. I can walk into this situation and have it not affect me. Yeah, not true. Not true at all. I can be there with someone in their grief. That's not true. Because when you see someone in that amount of pain, our first instinct to do is to jump in there and make everything okay. We want to make them feel better. And since Christopher died, I have learned that that is the wrong response. The right response, if there is a right response, and I think there is. I really do. I know everybody's grief is different, but you can never go wrong if you just sit with someone in their pain. That's all. You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be present and not take it personal. And just be there. I can put way too much emphasis on what we say. Don't say anything, because I guarantee it'll be the wrong thing. Just be there. And also understand, too, after this whole training thing, that I am a gut person, which means as I go into any situation and I pay attention to what my intuition is telling me. And so when I go into the situation, I respond with what my intuition tells me to do. So if my intuition tells me to sit with you, then I sit with you. If it tells me to speak, and it'll tell me what to say, I'll say it. But I realize not everyone knows how to do that or relies on that sixth sense. And I really don't understand how they operate in the world without it. Because in this training, they're talking about, like, if you go into the room and you see this person doing this, this is how you respond. Or if this person's doing this, this is how you respond. Not understanding that how you respond is critically important too. So when you walk into that room, how are you going to respond? Are you going to be coherent enough to do what needs to be done? Or are you going to freeze? And you don't know until you get into the situation. And that was the frustrating part for me, was if you don't acknowledge that that is a possibility, then what happens when you get into the situation? You're going to be shocked, you're going to be confused, but I guarantee you're not going to be able to be there for the person that you were trying to help. And I thought about that. So in August, I responded to a crisis for work, and I thought about that. I was like, what would have happened if I'd had somebody, another grieving mom, that could have come to my house the day that Christopher died? What if she'd come after the funeral and she showed up at my house? And she had said to me, I'm sorry, I know your pain, and sat with me. Would it have made a difference? I think it would have. I really think it would have. But maybe not. But I wonder. And I don't know, I want to say what a luxury that would be, but maybe I would have felt less alone, and if I'd had somebody to answer my questions, like, am I still a mom? Would it have been different? Because I'm still going to think about that. Because in our local area, we have a group that responds to when there's a suicide, they go out to help the families. What if we had something like that for grieving moms? For women that suffer miscarriages in the hospital, if they had someone on speed dial, and I'm talking peer support. I'm not talking professionals. I'm talking peer support. If somebody came to help that mom, would it make a difference? I don't know. Tell me what you think. Because I would really like to know, would it make a difference? But more and more, the more I do this podcast and the more I have these experiences, I'm starting to realize that I'm very comfortable with death. And before I did this podcast today, I Googled death culture in the United States surrounding the loss of a child. So do we have a culture? So what defines culture is it's the societal response to the loss of a child. It can be customs, it can be language, it can be rituals. So what is our culture surrounding the loss of a child? Don't talk about it. Don't make other people uncomfortable. You only get the 3 days to mourn. And God forbid, don't burden other people with it. And that's really a sad, sad place to be. When I think of all those poor people, I don't know what the statistics are, but I know they're pretty high. Especially now with the suicide rate so high. People die every day. Someone's mother, someone's brother, someone's child. Everyone that dies is someone's child. We have to change the culture surrounding the loss of our children. We just have to. So I'm going to end it here. Thank you for listening. If you are interested in coming on and talking about the loss of your child, reach out to me on grievinginsomniacs@gmail.com. I'm on Instagram, Grieving Insomniacs. I'm on Facebook, Grieving Insomniacs. And I also have a webpage. It's christyhaberman.com, Grieving Insomniacs. I hope to start having merchandise here soon. Winter's coming up here in South Dakota, so I'm going to have a lot more time to spend on my podcast. I'm thinking of each and every one of you. I hope that there's something that I say that resonates with you and brings you a sense of peace and helpfulness. Thanks for listening. This is your host, Christy Haberman and Kai the Wonder Dog, and we're signing off for today. Thanks for listening.